Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by Ndis Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hello everyone, you're listening to the SDA Housing Podcast, a show that explains, highlights, guides and brings awareness about all things SDA in this ever-changing NDIS world. I'm Debbie from NDIS Property Australia, and with me I've got from the office Maddie. Welcome Maddie.
Hi, how are we?
Good. Maddie, this is your second episode recording with us, so welcome back.
Yes, it is.
Today, Maddie being our resident NDIS expert, we have come across an article just published about a week and a half ago by Team DSC. And they're talking about foundational supports, which was one of the parts of the NDIS review. And this is a very interesting article. And I think Maddie is the perfect person to really talk to this and analyse this with her knowledge from within the NDIS in a previous role. So, Maddie, take it away.
So for anyone who may not be familiar with what foundational supports are commonly known as disability supports other than the NDIS. And with this article coming out, I guess it did bring a few things to light in regards to just how many people are missing out and may not, have the knowledge on who to go to get information about how they can improve their chances of getting onto the NDIS. But, I guess we'll go into a few different points and we'll chat about the article and some interesting facts that I didn't even know in this article, which is quite interesting. But let's just start off with just a common fact that was added in. So 4.4 million Australians live with a disability. And of those, 1.4 million that are under 65 and need assistance with daily living activities do actually have a big struggle with getting onto the NDIS. There is a huge number of people who need daily support but are not able to access this. So what do we do? Where do we go? Who do we turn to in this time of need? And I suppose this article is sort of aiming to provide those answers to people that are struggling with this.
So, Maddie, what are they saying needs to change?
So, what needs to change? They've put that, the NDIS says that for people with disability that are not eligible for the NDIS, there is going to be a few changes, such as community attitudes need to improve, mainstream services need to be more inclusive and accessible. That I do agree with. I find that some services and supports, it can be quite difficult to access. And then also foundational supports must be more widely available. So hopefully that they can make improvements on that. And then the additional 3 major reforms is more funding. They need access to more funding and an expansion of the type of support available and improved design and service delivery.
So, Maddie, talk to us about in this article, they're talking about targeted versus general foundational supports. So what are your thoughts on these?
Well, it does say that they're looking at the review recommends that governments fund 2 types of foundational supports, both general supports and targeted supports. So general foundational supports are available to all people with disabilities under 65. And then they include the types of supports that were traditionally funded by the Informational Linkages and Capacity Building Program. So this includes things like navigation. Navigators would help people access and use mainstream, foundational and NDIS supports. Individual advocacy as well, capacity building for caregivers, of course, employment services, and then more information advice and capacity building on top of that. So that's usually general foundational supports. And then you get more into the targeted foundational supports, which is again for people with disabilities under 65 who are not eligible for the NDIS but still require early intervention or less intensive support. So these might include home and community care, aids and assistive technology. That will come in very handy. And then psychosocial disability supports as well, early intervention and support for life transition.
Now, I'm just going to go back to the beginning of this report where it came out of the NDIS final review that came out in December, or NDIS 2.0 as we like to call it. But we do know that foundational supports are the only recommendation from that review that we know will be implemented, because before the report was released, the National Cabinet actually announced that they'd reached a decision to fund foundational supports, and that will be through a 50-50 split with the Commonwealth and state and territory governments. So we know that this is happening, so that's why we thought it was really important to actually look into this further when we saw this article and sort of analyse a bit more. So what else are you getting out of this, Maddie?
Well, I guess my one question is they're saying that these will be implemented, but my question is when? When are we looking at these changes to start happening? Because, these people are struggling now. They need this now. And I understand that some of these things do take time, but, it would be good to get more of a clearer guideline as to how soon we should be looking at this change happening.
Yeah, I don't think it's not going to be any time really, really soon. There was a media release that the strategy will be presented to National Cabinet for approval in the second half of this year.
Okay, yeah. All right. Now, we're hearing a lot about people under the age of 65, but what's going to happen to those that are over the age of 65 that do struggle with things like aged care support? What's going to happen with those ones? Any insight there, Deb? What do you reckon? What's with those?
Look, I mean, the NDIS was always for people under the age of 65, with the understanding that the aged care system, it was already well in place and able to support people over that age. But I'm sure there is an overlap, certainly where they're not getting the support from the aged care system that could possibly be provided by the foundational supports outside of that. So, I mean, I'm hoping that doesn't really talk about it, but I am hoping that there is going to be some consideration in whatever they're recommending, whatever the proposal is going to be.
So the article is actually stating that there is 630,529 people on the NDIS. I think it's actually more than that. You were saying earlier there's more than that on the NDIS now.
Yeah, it's actually the new data which was released very recently is we've now got 646,449 people who've got an NDIS plan.
So that means that there's still a huge number of people who need daily support but are not able to access, Australia's main disability support stream.
Interesting too was the different types of disabilities that they were talking about in this article that and not getting NDIS supports.
Yeah, a big amount of the people. I think it was one third of the people that aren't actually receiving the support that they need, either children or people that struggle with psychosocial disabilities and chronic health conditions.
Yeah. So look, we know psychosocial disabilities, something that the NDIS has spoken about quite a lot over the last couple of years, and whether people with those disabilities will be better looked after with a different system outside of the NDIS. So maybe that's going to be part of where this is going to go. And yes, half of the people with NDIS plans are children. But there's obviously a lot more children that are not being found eligible. So yeah, there's got to be new ways to get these people and these children the sort of supports that there are. And just looking at one of the points that they raised, the early intervention, the targeted supports, an example of the WA government, there's a program called Inklings Program for Infants Showing Signs of Autism in WA. So there are different, I guess, programs out there that are starting to be released. And this is all part of it.
Yeah, there are signs that, things are starting to be implemented, which is a good sign. That's a good thing.
Yeah, but look, we obviously talk mainly about specialist disability accommodation, and today this has nothing to do with that. But, I think it's really important if you're going to be involved in this sector, then, having an understanding of what's going on in the greater NDIS world is really important. And I think foundational supports is really important to know because, you may well know somebody who's not eligible for an NDIS plan, but it does require some type of health intervention. So, really good to know that this has been recognised, I guess, for the greater Australian population at large, because we do know that 4.4 million people with a disability, a lot of them are not being looked after at all.
Yeah. Hey, Debbie, we were just talking about this earlier. LACs, local area coordinators. Yeah. This is actually something that I wasn't aware of, so I wanted to share it with everyone else. So LSCs, their initial mission was to support people ineligible for the NDIS and giving them a bit of guidance on things that they can do in improving their chances of being accepted onto the NDIS. But now they're actually a little more focused on the original planning of NDIS plans. So I guess it's interesting to me because I had no idea that was their initial mission. And obviously, there's a lot more people on the NDIS than they originally expected. Hence why they're getting very caught up in the planning rather than following their initial mission of supporting people that are having those major barriers with getting onto the NDIS.
Mm. Yeah, that is very interesting. It's also worth noting that with the proposed changes to a lot of the roles in the NDIS, the new navigator role is actually being proposed to take the place of support coordinators and local area coordinators and psychosocial recovery coaches. So, yeah, that's all tied up with this as well. Yeah, a lot of work for them to do to come up with ways that this is going to work, but I guess that's why they need another 6 months or so to get this together before they're going to present it.
I am looking forward to seeing this change. I think that it will be really, I think it will help a lot of people. So I am, excited to start seeing a bit of change, and I am excited for those that really do need this change.
Yeah. Well, any last words, Maddie, on this article and in general, foundational supports?
No, I think we've covered it. You feel free to head on to the Team DSC's website.
Yeah, we'll actually put the link in this episode description too if you want to read this article.
Yeah, feel free to have a bit of a read through. It is interesting stuff, and there is they do have links to the NDIS review final report, and supporting analysis, and a bit of a fact sheet on foundational supports there too, just for your information.
Fabulous. Well, thanks a lot, Maddie. I think that covers the article that we wanted to cover today. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.